Hey guys, I'm Jeremy D&D from Power Up Gamers, and I have some special guests with me tonight to do a workshop video about narrative descriptions. And so I'll introduce them in a second and give them a chance to plug what they want. I do want to thank everyone for their support, both in the YouTube channel, the Kickstarter, or for Legat's Tomb of Amazing Creatures that we launched like 3 days ago. We're already a third of the way to our initial goal, all for our work, so that's been pretty awesome. So tonight with me, we have Chad Knicks, Jeff Doty, and Jeremy Lily. So let's begin with Chad. Go ahead, Chad.
Yep, sorry, I was muted. Hi guys, my name is Chad Knicks. You guys can find me on YouTube at Chad Knicks, and also I am glad and super happy to be here, man. Talking about narrative description with you. This is super awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome, Jeff. You're up.
Yep, I'm Jeff. I have a YouTube channel called Encounter Balance. It's mostly just games that I'm running stuff on there. Planning on hopefully doing a couple other things with that pretty soon in the near future as well. I'm also 1/3 of the podcast that I am a part of, the Dudes of Yore, which is kind of what this whole group of us is.
Except me.
Yeah, except for you. Me and Jeremy are super excited to have Chad, who will be joining us on that project going forward as well. So can't wait to get in with that. This is actually the first fully formed Dudes of Yore.
I know it feels pretty special, man. Like I didn't want to say it, so I was like, I'm just gonna leave that to one of y'all to do it. But like this feels good, man.
Yeah, pretty awesome. Especially having it's your first time all together.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've done a bunch of stuff before as people, as friends, but never as the Dudes of Yore. So it's exciting.
Awesome. Yeah. And last but not least, Jeremy.
Yeah, hey everybody. This is Jeremy. I run the YouTube channel, the Erasmus Expeditions. It's mainly just kind of live play games. Hopefully, I will be adding some additional videos to that in the coming year. I do apologize if there's some background noise. We have a party next door. Hopefully it doesn't get too distracting. But yeah, as Jeff mentioned, we're the Dudes of Yore, newly formed into a 3 triplet. I'm not to use the other word. That was just really weird. So we're a triplet now. And yeah, it's really exciting. And this will be the first outing as the full Dudes of Yore, as Jeff said. So I'm really excited to be here and to talk about.
I feel like it's the press conference before the press conference. Like it's the press conference before the first initial.
We are announcing, making an announcement about an announcement.
Exactly.
But yeah, especially about something like narrative description, which I know is a huge deal for both Jeff and for Chad and myself. And so, yeah, like I'm really, really excited about this.
Awesome. So, I think first we should kind of define what we mean by narrative description. And for those that are newer DMs, because that's not a term that's often passed around until I would say the last 2, maybe 3 years. So for me, narrative description is when you describe something to the point of your players or the people involved being able to picture it almost like a movie, where they can actually see the object and imagine it. So how about you guys? And you can answer any order you want. Anything to add? Or a different take on it.
Yeah, just an interesting little thing that I actually just read about 6 months ago that really blew my mind. There's apparently a condition where they cannot visually imagine anything that is described to them. It's actually some kind of psychological condition.
Yeah, that is interesting. I hadn't heard of that.
Yeah, I was reading this article. It was written by somebody who suffers from this condition, and he described it as being something he didn't fully understand, that it was just a lifelong thing. He said he just didn't understand what people were describing and why they would go to so much detail. And then he eventually learned that it's actually a psychological condition of some kind. It just really blew my mind.
Yeah, that's a cool way to look at it.
Yeah. But as far as the topic, sorry to kind of go off on a tangent. But,
oh, that's fine.
Especially the first thing. But narrative description, I think, it's kind of where, as a DM or as a GM, that you can kind of draw upon creative writing, poetry, that side of the artistic input for DMing. You know, you need to kind of brush up on your adjectives and your synonyms and things like that, because otherwise it can grow really stale. You want to be able to describe something with colorful language sometimes, you know, especially if you're kind of trying to set a particular tone or a particular style.
Yeah, language is definitely important.
Very huge, especially within a language like English, where it's so diverse and you have 16 different words that kind of mean the same thing, but depending on which one you choose sets a particular expectation.
Oh yeah, and definitely also the way you talk is a big thing. For example, using it's like this, like we've seen in some of the recent live videos that have been going around. It can totally alter the mood of what you're conveying. Right.
Yeah, and I think it's not just a matter of like the words that you pick, though those are of course very important, but even just the manner and you deliver the words, I think is just as important, if not more important, than the words that you pick. So like, just for example, like it's one thing to just be like, oh well, you come into a cold dark room and there's it's like, but if it's just like you can feel the chill of you like slow down your pace and you talk slower and more deliberately. It's like
definitely
the description is often like just as much as word choice is like delivery style, which I think is something that not a whole lot of people necessarily do. There are a couple of people who are fantastic at it, but it's always something to keep in mind of like, if you're describing something to the players, how do you want it to feel, and how is the way that you say that contributing or detracting from that feel?
Oh, definitely. I'm definitely by no means an expert at delivery, but that was a very important part of the drama and the debate clubs that I belonged to all through high school. So I did learn quite a bit there. Chad, you got something to add?
Yeah, I mean, like, the thing is, for me, at least, with narrative description, I guess I come from, like, an acting background. Like, I've had that in my background for a long time. So as soon as I started getting introduced to D&D, it was kind of natural for me to immediately take that acting background and, like, transfer it to, well, instead of, like, this is this thing, you know, and just being able to say that, I'm like, well, no, you can't, I can't see that until I explain it in some sort of way that's a little bit more flourished and a little bit more built up. This is just a sword, yeah. You know?
I have something similar coming from a storyteller writing background, but it's definitely not to the level that acting takes it.
Yeah.
So I know
but
visualize exactly what you mean there.
Yeah, man. I think the thing is, like, for me, what I've seen a lot of DMs doing lately is taking that narrative description and putting it forefront, right? I have seen that happening in the community, and I love it because it means that they're actively noticing that to get people more immersed in your situation, you have to build the world around them, and then they'll become more active within your game.
Yeah, you have to paint
I don't know. Like, I love that. I love that stuff, man.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
That's definitely
going off of what Jeff said, man. The other night when I was doing like Val, just trying to explain the initial opening scene where they're coming in and seeing the ship for the first time and seeing like bodies floating in space. I could have just said that, but the way that I had to describe it to make it even more eerie or make it even more like dark for me was, I'm going to add frost to their skin. I'm going to add this, that, and the other. I'm going to add this bits and pieces of things to make it look even worse in your mind.
And that's a very good point, is adding little details.
Exactly. Just like adding those little pieces, just little nuggets of stuff that will continually bring it back around to your players' minds and make them feel more immersed.
And of course, it always helps to relate the scene to a character's backstory if you can, and or something the player has experienced in their own life. Like that always adds another layer to it as well.
But one of the really nice things about narrative description is essentially what you're doing is you are selecting the things in a particular scene that you want to give a sense of importance to. And if you do that appropriately, if you give enough detail but not too much about a particular feature, the large brown rain barrel, it draws the player's attention enough to it that they might play with it in the scene. Instead of it just being a part of the background, they're going to think, oh, wait a second, there was that big rain barrel, so I'm going to go over there and I'm going to push that down to make the ground slick. And it makes them play with the scene more instead of simply going to their character sheet and going, I'll attack again.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
One other
good point there. Like, description is often, I'd say, or even more so, just as much about what you leave out as it is of what you include. Like, I think it's important to keep in mind when you're trying to describe something, like, what are you trying to accomplish with the description? What sort of tone are you trying to create? What sort of attention are you trying to draw to specific points in specific areas or specific people? Because there's a sort of a mindset in D&D that's unavoidable, where if you point something out as a DM, your players are going to gravitate towards those things. If you make a point of doing a huge elaborate description for something, has nothing to do with the game, your players are going to spend 30 minutes trying to figure out what they're supposed to do with this elaborately described statue that had nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
So it's like, it can often just be a matter of like, you can mention stuff, but leave the descriptions, the vivid descriptions, for the points that you're trying to draw people to, whether that's a feeling or a person or an item, and let the descriptions choose where you're going to shine the spotlight of the game.
Exactly. I did find a comment interesting that Jeremy had made that I'd like to visit that part of it for a moment, where he had made a comment about giving enough detail without giving too much. So I'd like to kind of visit that side and figure out kind of where that line is in the scene.
Sure. What is the saying about brevity and wit? Brevity is the soul of wit, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and writing, it can be this way as well, but especially when you're DMing, and especially in something like a one-shot, like where time is crucial. And if you're going to read 3 pages of intro dialogue, you're going to lose your players before you get finished with the first page. It's just an unfortunate product of the society that we live in now. Everybody's got short attention spans.
That was one thing that was a big part of the Dragon Grim one-shot I ran called Fleetwood. Personally, I thought it was the best session I ran in 30 some odd years. Players loved it, but all of them said the intro was a little bit long.
I imagine most of us have probably suffered from that exact form of itis.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a pretty common progression that happens is like, so as a new DM, your descriptions are going to be very light if you even have descriptions at all. You know, you're just going to be like, here's the thing, here's the person, whatever. And then you start to kind of realize like, oh, well, I can add flowery descriptions and make it more poetic and more narrative, and I can make it flowery and interesting. And then suddenly you're describing this room and describing and describing and describing, and it's like, there's a point where it's like you learn you become too powerful, and you don't know how to control it, so you just go and go and go.
Oh yeah,
it's like there's a huge part of role-playing games where less is often so much more, as long as the little bit, like, it needs to be impactful but short. It needs to be quick and to the point, and as much as flowery and vivid as you can make it within that small period is amazing.
You
hit a point very quickly where it becomes way too much.
I have one DM, and this is no joke, excellent DM, as far as story plot, giving players agency, but when it came to narrative descriptions, and he did good with what he was describing, the problem came in that he described everything. In an 8-hour session, and I remember this to this day, 6 hours of him was describing this one corridor we were in a tomb, down to how many pebbles were on the ground in the debris that surround us.
Nah, dude, like, I call that the Tolkien, like, that's the Tolkien rule, right? Like, where you spend 3.5 chapters to try to like describe what a river looks like in a city, and then you're like, oh wait, I don't need to be talking about this river, I need to be talking about getting this ring to Mordor. Like, it took us 3 chapters to get there, but it finally, we get to the Shire and we see Frodo, you know, and then these kinds of things. And that to me is like Tolkien syndrome. I've had Tolkien syndrome. I'm sure everybody's had Tolkien syndrome at some point.
We've all done it. And it really is a learning process. You learn the best by doing and getting feedback on what you're doing, and which has helped me tremendously over the last couple years. I've made giant leaps as a DM. But for me, the boundary line kind of lays in, you want to give the players enough description that they can picture the scene and get the kind of feeling and emotion tone that you're meaning to convey. So saying something along the lines of, you cross us this grassy and the stalks up to your knees, and you look out in the horizon and to see this plane goes on for miles is better than, oh, you're in the grasslands.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of piggybacking off of, you know, knowing, like you said, where to draw the line being a thing of experience, it's also incredibly helpful to try to finish before the plane gets closer. that it's also important to learn how to read the temperature of the table. Like if you know the players that you're going to be playing with, and you can kind of set your expectations by what you know of them, but also kind of leaving your ability of description a little improvisational so that you can tone it down or up depending on how receptive the table is being at any given moment.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's
and
a very
I think
good point.
I think you also need to try to I think especially like new DMs or like DMs who are like DMing after being writers. This is something that happens a lot, I think, where
Oh,
you have to ask yourself, who are you describing this for? Are you describing it for you because you want to be able to describe it, or are you describing it for the players? And like drawing that line, I think is like an important starting point. I think it's very easy to tell when a DM is being self-indulgent with their descriptions, and they're just going on and on because they want to create a cool image because they enjoy the artistry of image crafting. And it becomes about what they're doing rather than what scene is setting for the players who have to act in this scene. I think using that as kind of a barometer is a good starting place for drawing that line. Saying, is this contributing to what the players need to know, or am I just doing this because I want to show all the prep and all the practice and all my flowery descriptions that I know how to do?
And kind of along with that, one little tip I found is if you're having a description that's longer than, say, 2 minutes, involve the player characters. As mentioned, oh, okay, you Kufis, for example, you're looking around on the scene that I've described. What are you looking for in particular? And allow them to add something to it. And keep it short. I find 2 to 3 minutes is enough time to describe what we need to describe as DMs.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, even for me, that's even, I'd say probably too much. Like,
yeah,
if you can't say what you need to say in like a minute or less, you're probably trying to say too much, and you're probably saying things that don't actually matter. Like, a minute is a surprisingly long time. Like, it doesn't sound like a lot, but when it's just the GM as the only person who's just talking and talking and talking, 1 or 2 minutes feels a lot longer than you think it does.
I give I give myself a little bit extra time because I know my speech impediment, and sometimes I repeat words.
I mean, of course, like ignoring that kind of thing, though, it's just like the brevity, as Jeremy put it earlier, is like probably, I think, one of the most important things with descriptions. Like,
exactly.
And I usually give myself some leeway at the beginning of a campaign, in particular.
Yeah.
Because you're setting a very big stage. You don't want to go overboard with the exposition, but you're not only setting like culture, time period, time of year, a lot of very important things that could have bearing on the story. So I definitely give myself a little bit of leeway there.
That's totally fair.
If I do any large passages of time, I'll kind of, draw out the description a little bit there to kind of help feel that, to kind of emulate that drag that, it's been slow.
It definitely depends also on what you're running. Like you said, a campaign, you can drag out bits of description over time, whereas in a one-shot, you don't have 10 sessions to describe the kingdom at the end. So that's something for people to keep in mind too, just how many sessions are you running? So Ed, did you have something to kind of add to how you would determine kind of that fine line between too much description and not enough?
I feel like I haven't been DMing as long as like the other guys here. I'm more of a player on that end. Like I play in a lot of games, but I don't run as many games.
Okay.
I will say I am learning from a vast majority of DMs on how to do this. And Jeremy and Jeff have been really good friends in teaching me how to do this too. But I do think that there is like this fine line between like appropriately available. So I'll give you an example based off the last game I ran, which was my Val game.
Okay.
The game itself went 4.5 hours. A lot of the things that I wanted to do is every time I would go into a room, I had a set of 4 bullet points of descriptive things that I wanted for each room, right? And I had to cover those. And once I covered those, I gave it to my players. And I said, okay, like, what would you need in this room, or what would you want in this room that would make you feel like you had some sort of player agency? So I took the burden off of myself and gave it to them. I gave them the set dressing so that they knew what it looked like, and then I allowed them to sort of help me. So I had a player who was a sniper, right? And she wanted to be able to get into high ground areas and things like that so that she could go and shoot down from above. I didn't plan for that, but as soon as she said, like, hey, are there high ground levels? Are there different areas of inflection
I can get to?
Immediately I was like, yes, of course. So now it's being the DM, being flexible with your players, and allowing your players to also build that set dressing with you. So you're not carrying the full burden, and you're not also looking like you're doing consistent monologue for like an hour and a half just to build up to, you just now enter the village,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That actually reminds me of one of the things I did in a session, and I knew in this snow elf village, kind of Eskimo style, they would come across the entire tribe being mysteriously gone. But on the doorways on each doorway was carved symbols in blood. I did not prep what those symbols looked like, nothing. And so I had each player pick a doorway and describe what the symbol looked like, and then I kind of wrapped it into a little package of, oh, you guys recognize these symbols as belonging to this religious cult that they were looking for. So that's a very good technique on description. I use it constantly. I won't say if there's trees around, if there's boulders around, let the players add that stuff.
Yeah, and kind of speaking as far as letting the players get involved, even going away from like letting them get involved with the description itself, I think kind of going back to like lengthy description things, like make sure that if you have something where you need a lot of description, I'd say instead of trying to do a huge block of expedition where you have this long passage of just talking and talking and, here's the season, here's the time, here's the day, here's all this, all that, not like give a little bit of exposition. Like, here's the place that you're in, and then give the players an opportunity to like role play with each other, talk amongst themselves. And then after they've had a little bit to speak with each other, then you can say, okay, well, it's this season, so you need to go do this soon. And then give them time to like let the descriptions breathe in between interaction. I think most people don't necessarily that there's a lot of description, but if you pack it all into a single giant block, it becomes very cumbersome and very hard to deal with, and you lose focus. But if you can kind of space it out across maybe the first quarter of a session and give the players opportunities to breathe and interact with the world between those descriptions, I think that goes a long way too towards lessening the burden that descriptions can put on a game.
Oh, definitely. Hey. So we've talked a little bit about what narrative description is. We kind of talked about giving too much detail, not enough. Let's talk a little bit about how we actually narratively describe something. For me, and I know this is pretty common among all of us here, we tend to try to hit up all 5 senses. So what does it sound like? What does it smell like? Taste like? And not all 5 are always applicable, but usually you can make do. And it just maybe a quick sentence on each of the 5 senses. And then you're off to the next thing. So that's how I like to do it. I'm sure each of these guys would say the same, and you guys are free to kind of expand on that or add something to it if you like.
Yeah, I typically stick to maybe 2 or 3 of the 5 senses in any given scene. I usually try to find things that are the most prominent. You know, if you're down at the docks, then the smell is probably going to be the biggest thing that's going to, you know, dictate that. And then the feeling, you know, you're going to feel the salt in the air, you know, the wind coming off the ocean, you know, those kinds of things. And if you just pick on 2 or 3 of the senses, I've found that most players can usually fill in the rest on their own and usually still be on the same page, or at least close enough that you can move on and you don't have to spend more time describing.
Exactly. Hey, I definitely would say 2 to 3 senses minimum.
I mean, I would honestly say 2 to 3 maximum. Like I tend to be pretty light, more light than maybe some other people with descriptions. Like being short and snappy and like keeping the pace is really important for me in a game. And I think Jeremy brings up a really good point where it's like, you know, if I tell you that you're by the ocean and you can smell the ocean and you can feel the salt, like I don't really need to say too much more than that. Like as long as if you've ever been a person and you've been in that environment, like your brain fills in the rest of the story.
Yeah.
So like it's important to tie in a couple like sensory details, but I think some people tend to overdo it where they want to like try to hit all 5 like it's some sort of bullet point list.
Yeah.
Really like you just hit the most important thing and then maybe like a sub note of like this a little bit of the second most important thing.
Yeah, usually
and then just
usually I prep all 5 and then I'll actually use maybe 3.
Well, I mean, that's another difference. I never prep anything. Like
that's why Jeff runs so many games, because he doesn't have to prep. He literally just like goes online and goes, "Hey, who wants to play with me?" We're just gonna
I'm not even kidding. My prep for my session tonight was a list of Old English names. That was it. I was like, well,
that's amazing.
Like, if they fight people, here are the names I'm gonna use. That was my prep, and it's like the rest I just improvise. So I don't have to worry about that.
I'm pretty prep light as well, but I'll have a couple locations and I'll have like the 5 senses underneath them. And it just usually 1 or 2 words. It's dark, gloomy, airy looking, something along those lines. So how about you, Chad?
Yeah, I think for me, when it comes to that, how I choose to describe narrative, narrative descriptions is I do try to stick to the 5 senses, but mostly it's like I'm not going to describe all 5 senses for all the things that are within the room, right?
Yeah.
So I usually, on the top of something that I write in prep, I'll write whatever the main focal point of that room is, right? And then I'll focus on trying to describe that main focal point, and then have the players like extrapolate out from there. You know, like I don't want to carry all the weight. I want to be able to like, here's a room. Here is a couple of the senses that you're feeling as soon as you walk into the room. Here's the main focal point. Now go have fun. The end. You know, like I'm very, very simple and precise when it comes to that kind of stuff.
And one of the things I do is I never use more than like 2 focal points in a room. Or a cave chamber, or anyone scene probably only has 2 different focal points as a DM that I put in there. Because you don't want to overwhelm your players.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
But on the same hand, there might be more than one thing that is important in the scene.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you flood their senses, they're not going to know what's left and right, you know? Like if I had a scene with 4 other people, like most, you know, like most games are, right? You want to have every person have the spotlight, at least in some way, to sort of be able to describe their experience within this room. So how do I do that while also maintaining my efforts as a GM is really important for me. So I do very little light stuff and then let them help me describe the rest of the room as they're reacting to it, because I don't know what they're going to find important. So somebody could be like, oh, well, you know what? I'm really hurting right now. I'm really wounded in this moment. I would like very much if I could see if I could find something in this room that might be like a med kit or something that I could find. Immediate reaction now, narratively describing it, I go, yeah, absolutely, there is some stuff here, and let me tell you what you look at, what you see, and how that sounds, or whatever that is.
Yeah. Because
you asked for that discovery, here's the discovery.
Yeah, and that's a very important thing too, is players, if they want something, they will ask for it. I would say 90% of the time. So don't feel like you have to put stuff in the scene based on the characters. They'll do that for you. Yeah, you want something that makes sense in the story that might give them an important clue. Oh, but you don't need to give it specifically towards any one character.
I had a game that I ran where the players were trying to solve the Whitechapel murders while they were kind of going on. And so that was a particular style of game where I went a little heavier when describing like a crime scene that they would come across, because I had purposefully already hidden the clues, because it was a murder mystery style game. I had purposefully hid specific clues within the scene that they either could or could not discover depending on their roles, what they decided to go and do. So I went a little heavy on the descriptions for that, because I wanted to both have the things that were important laid out in the description, but also to give enough additional detail to kind of hide those things, initially. So that way, the hindsight, once they figured the clue out, was, oh, that's what he meant where he said whatever.
Yeah. And that's a very good point, not just for the style of game, but if you want something to be a clue that the player or characters need to figure out, you can go heavier on description, you might go lighter. But a lot of it definitely has to do with pacing, what the players want. as well as DMing. One thing I do want to mention, since Chad actually mentioned it earlier, with him coming from the background of being more of a player, is this applies to players as well, not just DMs and storytellers. So let's talk just a moment, really brief, about using this as a player. For me, there's literally no difference other than what you're describing. You describe what your character is doing, thinking, feeling, and rather than what is actually in the scene. You might draw an element of the scene in, but overall it's based more on the character than the scene itself.
Yeah, or the character's relationship to the scene, at least. But
exactly.
Yeah, I would throw a caveat on that. For me personally, at least, I find myself being much more cautious of overdoing it as a player than when I'm running a game, because I try to be mindful of the fact that there's X number of other players who need to do the same thing, and if they're, especially online, if there's an audience, that's however much times 4 or times 5 that the person watching the game needs to sit through before we get back to the story, before we get back to the action.
Exactly.
So
yeah, 100%. Like the whole less is more thing that I was talking about with descriptions earlier, I think it applies like 10 times as much as a player. Like we've all had that game where we're sitting there and like everyone's doing like their character intros or something like that, and you know, you have like a 1 minute scene, a 1 minute scene, a 1 minute scene of some cool short things, and then somebody has like a 15-minute character introduction where they have all these flashbacks and descriptions and all these thoughts and these detailed stories. Like it's so easy as a player to cross that line and just be like, you've gone way overboard, because as Jeremy rightly says, like the time that you spend as a player is an opportunity cost against the other player's time as well. So if I spend 10 minutes on my introduction, if everybody did that, you know, it'd be an hour before we started the game. So it's like you have to kind of think more about time economy and really go for like the punchiest, most impactful way that you can get across what you're trying to do in the shortest amount of time, because that time matters even more as a player.
And going off that, one of the tricks I use to keep introductions and descriptions short is I will actually screen share an image rather than describe it. And I'll just say, this is what my character looks like. Or this is how I imagine this item looking. And then I just kind of let it rest.
I'm a huge proponent of the pictures are worth 1,000 words. Like I adhere to that very, very, very strictly. I'm also just a huge fan of art in general, so that doesn't hurt.
Exactly. So Chad, how about you? We haven't from you yet.
Yeah, man. So in my opinion, right, when it comes to that as a player, like I love that stuff. I love being able to have the DM give me an environment and then just play in the environment, right? Like, give me a setting, give me a like, let me play dress up, and let me just like rock this situation out. I do agree with everything that the guys have said already about keeping it short, keeping it sweet, because I do believe that it's a shared stage, right?
Yeah.
Especially in online games, it's a shared stage. If you try to take the spotlight too long, somebody's going to kick you off. Somebody's going to be like, dude,
shut up.
Jackass, you're kind of exactly this, that, and the other. and so I always tend to, if I'm a player, I tend to look at my character. I tend to think about what my character might sound like, especially for me, because I'm a huge proponent of and voices at the table. I do it all the time, but it's one of those things that, like, if you can make your voice sound impactful, if you can make that character sound memorable in some way, it doesn't matter what they look like, because you'll be so focused on what they sound like, right? So I don't have to spend as much time describing what, for instance, I'll go into taxes, right? For lore keepers, I don't have to go into it, describe like how big he is or what kind of armor he wears or this, that, and the other. And if I do, it's for really impactful moments, and or within. I don't have to describe it because it comes out when I do his voice. So I guess is like being what doing that as a player means for me is you just pick the impactful things that are gonna sell that character in a very short period.
Yeah, and I think something that Chad says too that I think is really important, like in regards to voice, is like good character interaction. So like role play between characters will accomplish what your description would try to do 10 times as effectively. Like if you can share a scene across 3 people who are talking to each other, that'll be far more interesting than each person going on their own 3-minute tirade about their character.
Absolutely, dude.
I think
one
that's
of the
part of
things
what
that
the responsibility
I
as a player.
Swear by. Yeah, one of the things I swear by when I go into games is like, cool person, at least one person, a banter partner for the entire session. I'm gonna have one person I can carry the rest of the way. And if I can do it with all 3, then I know, oh my god, I've got a campaign group going. Because like if you can get 3 or 4 people who get your mojo and get your vibe, it makes things so much cleaner to be like, oh my god, that's an inside joke, or that's this thing, and like I didn't have to sell anybody on it. There was nothing there. It just happens naturally and organically. It's awesome.
Yeah, like a scene where each person describes their stuff individually will drag very quickly. It'll immediately feel like it's slowing the game down, like it's dragging things out. But a good roleplay scene across the party, you can go for an hour and not even realize it, and no one will care. Like it's such a different feel to the game when the whole group is getting involved with each other and interacting with each other, rather than each person describing their own thing on their own time.
Oh, definitely. Totally different feels, and I definitely agree. If you can bring other people into it, do so. For me, what I try to do is 2 to 3 sentences max in the description. And that takes maybe a minute depending on how long I'm talking. But that's kind of the sweet spot that I go for is 2 or 3 sentences. So I think we've covered narrative description pretty well. Is there anything else you guys would like to add or talk about before I give an example?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that like I'll definitely speak up to, and I'll use our personal like example of this, guys. Over last year, we got to sit down and play, or this year or later, early in I think June or July, we got to sit down and play a little game of Fiasco. And like that game is probably one of my most memorable games. Like we got to sit down and play it live with each other, and I think that's where we became like really, really good friends. But it's that kind of game, and so I swear by like Fiasco and some of the like more narrative description games that you can find out there, if you can find narrative description games where you're forced to play as a player, but also like one person has to take kind of a DM role just to keep track of stuff, but everybody's playing as a character, it gives you an opportunity to narratively have to describe stuff. It makes you actually have to narratively describe a scene. That's why I love Fiasco so much.
Yeah.
You have to describe the scene as you enter. So it gives you an opportunity to narratively describe something with another person, and or at least 2 to 3 people at the table. Of building skills or games like it expand upon for your own personal DM or player use in D&D, Fate, whatever. Like, I will remember that game more than any game I've ever played, just because of how cool and how tight knit we ended of that night.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, Fiasco is excellent for narrative description, and just the couple times I've played, it has been amazing each time. It's really simple to learn and to use. And like Chad mentioned, these skills cross multiple games, whether it's Vampire the Masquerade, D&D, Pathfinder, Fiasco, Shadowrun, numerous games, numerous settings. These are general things that all of us use to some point or extent.
Yeah, Fiasco's like half a step removed from an acting exercise. It's essentially just an acting exercise with dice. And like whenever we played it, the game that Chad was referencing, we butchered the rules because I had no understanding of exactly how it was all supposed to work out.
Oh yeah, no, I think we officially like killed the rules, but we didn't care because it was like, oh hey, we're just having fun. We're having fun and you know, enjoying life.
I think we actually finished the entire first act and started the second before we realized, oh wait, there's something we're supposed to do with the first act with the dice.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just do whatever makes sense so we can move on.
Yeah. It does take a little bit of knowledge on the basic rule set and on how the system itself works. But I learn a lot each time I play it. It's based on who the players are, how they describe stuff. And that's a big tip for a new DM or a new player. Watch other people play. Watch what the DMs do. Whether you're in the session or it's a YouTube series that you're finding, and like most of us record campaigns and one-shots. So lots of options to choose from, lots of different styles, and you can learn something from all of them. And even us DMs that, like myself, that been DMing 30 plus years, we're constantly still learning new stuff.
Absolutely. I've been playing for kind of like 23 years now. And I've learned more in the past probably 2 years about the style of DM that I want to be from finding this community and starting to watch people's videos and listen to podcasts and things like that. It has changed the accessibility of information so much that it takes years of trial and error out of the equation.
Oh, definitely.
So much faster than reading or than playing through countless hours yourself. You can immediately with that little bit of objectivity, you can see, I don't like that, or I love that. And you can take and build your own little repertoire, your own little toolbox out of all the varied styles and methods of doing things.
Oh, definitely, and all of us do that as DMs and players. We've all done it. So let's get into a quick example, and we'll go one by one. I'll give an object and have each of you kind of give a real short narrative description using some of the things we talked about. So let's go with a stone statue. And I'll give you guys total freedom to describe it however you want. Long as it's kind of the narrative you would use as a DM or a player or both to get your point across and kind of convey the image of this stone statue. You can include sounds, anything like that you wish. So let's kind of change up the order some and begin with Jeff.
All right, so we're just like describing whatever stone statue comes to mind. All right, so imagine that you've like just come in to this room. This room is almost like a temple, but it's old, ancient, rundown, as if no one's been in there for a long time. In the center of this room is this statue. It's made entirely out of jade, but it's cracked, worn by time. It depicts this figure. It looks humanoid, wearing a cloak and a mask. The mask is in the shape of a stag beetle. You can see the horns coming up over the top of it, a crack running down through the middle of the mask. The figure almost stands stoically, as if some great hero, but broken and lost to time.
Awesome. And we'll try to keep them short like that, 1 to 2 minutes. But that was like perfectly done. So Chad.
So still going off stone statue, correct?
Yes.
All right, cool. So the darkness of this room is foreboding. As soon as you enter this room, a singular light cascades from the top, from a window above. It bathes this statue sitting at the back in a curtain of yellow light. The face upon the statue is worn with age, ancient amongst this almost newly remodeled museum. It looks down upon you in almost a gargoyle-like visage, and its eyes begin to glow.
Awesome. Good job. And Jeremy.
The marble that you see before you is very obviously one solid piece. Not just the figures but the pedestal that they stand on. And it's situated amid this room that is much too large for a structure of this statue size. But you know that that's part of the point. That the room is this big simply to showcase the stunning beauty of this statue. The ability that this sculpture has illustrated in stone belays any sense of reasoning that you can normally apply to what would be called art. There are parts of this that appear to be flesh, and within inches, that same stone becomes cloth or feathered wing. And it's this tangled sense of beauty as these figures are entwined around one another, reaching for the heavens.
Awesome. Well done, all three of you. And to let the viewers know, that was not planned. They knew we were doing an exercise, and I would say some kind of object. They didn't know what object I would pick. So, well done to all of them. They all kept it within like 1 minute. And I, for one, personally could imagine all three statues perfectly by what they described. And of course, being myself, some things caught my attention more than others. For the jade, I imagined a dark green jade instead of a lighter colored jade. And the yellow curtain, I pictured this pale golden and glow. This beautiful stone artwork. I pictured the finely polished marble. Or even though he didn't say it was finely crafted or polished in any way. So excellent job. Gives exactly the examples of what we've been talking about this evening. And you're welcome to use this as an exercise yourself, and you can write out a description, and you can record yourself giving a description. But you can do this with any object. Doesn't have to be a stone statue. Any location, any NPC, environment, and etc. It doesn't really matter, but it's a good exercise to do just when you got a couple minutes. It's free. So I wish to thank all three of the guys for being with me tonight on this video. It's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot. I'm sure they all have as well. So I'll give them all a chance to do a little outro. And we will begin with Jeremy.
Yeah, guys, it's been a lot of fun. I love talking gaming and D&D and all these kinds of theories and the psychology behind gaming and stuff. It's very fascinating to me. So the chance to be able to do that with not only you, Jaren, but also with my brothers, Jeff and Chad, it's a really, really awesome opportunity. So I appreciate you having us out.
Yeah, no problem at all. It was my pleasure, totally.
Yeah, I agree. Well, not totally, because I think that might have been split 4 ways, but
exactly.
but yeah, man, we've been the dudes of yore, and we still will be. And check us out on YouTube and SoundCloud. I think we're recording our 3rd episode at the end of this month on the 30th. We will be adding our 3rd. Chadley will be joining us. So yeah, it's kind of it'll be a celebration of 3s apparently.
Awesome.
So yeah, and I have the YouTube channel, the Erasmus Expedition. So go over there and check me out. Give me a like and subscribe and watch some of my games.
Awesome. Jeff.
Yeah, exactly what Jeremy said. If you get me talking about RPG stuff, I could just go for hours. So probably better to cut me off. Yeah, it was fun. Always a fun time to chat with some friends. I have a YouTube channel if you want to check it out. It's called Encounter Balance. I also have, as Jeremy mentioned, the podcast Dudes of Yore. 3rd episode is going to be coming out at the end of the month. I will try not to take forever to edit the audio. I don't like editing audio, but I have to do it. So that's my promise to you, person watching this. I won't take forever this time.
Awesome. Chad. You're muted, bro.
Oh, did he freeze?
All right.
Oh, there he is.
Hey, I'm here. No, guys, this is fun, man. Here's the thing. I love talking with all of you guys. Like the thing is that last little bit, I will say, like, I've loved talking about this stuff, but that last little bit where we were talking about like examples, sit here for 2 to 3 hours, just having Jaren like, and then like through and explain how we would do it, because that's super cool. Like those little nuggets are like the special parts that make me feel good. And I'm super excited. Is Chad Nick. You can find me on YouTube as Chad Nick on there. I am DM Gastro Gamer. I will be 1/3 of the Dudes of Yore come the, and I am so happy to have been on this channel. Thank you so much, Jaren, for having us, man. It has been a blast.
Oh, no problem at all. I love it. And of course, I'm the host, Jeremy D&D with Power Up Gamers. It's totally was fun. And I will say this video is part of a workshop convention type thing we're doing, and they will be released starting tomorrow at 6 a.m. Central Standard Time. And maybe next year we'll even get some games involved in the evenings. It was an idea that was brought up to me by Chris Johnson and from Absolute Tabletop and the Dog and Gaming Squad YouTube channel in just one of our many conversations, and I thought it was a good idea, so I kind of went with it and did it. We have many other topics. It's ranging from storytelling, how to build a story arc and plot, character development and backstories, invoking emotional responses within the players and characters. So, if you watch all of them, it should give you a really good set of base skills that you can use in any of your gaming sessions. So I thank everyone who's been part of it and the viewers, because this is what we do. So with that said, because all 3 of us or 4 of us could talk for hours and do this all night, I will simply say, may the dice always roll in your favor.